You know, every time you throw a ball, give a high five, or even just reach for the top shelf, there's one bone doing a ton of the heavy lifting behind the scenes. It's the true unsung hero of your shoulder. Today, we're diving into the scapula, or as you probably call it, the shoulder blade.
So that's the big question, right? How in the world does this one kind of flat, triangular bone give your arm such an incredible, almost 360-degree range of motion? I mean, it's so important that if its position is off by just a little bit, suddenly simple things like brushing your hair can become a real challenge.
Okay, so to really get it, we've got to zoom in and see what makes this thing such a masterpiece of biological engineering. Let's dive into this.
All right, first things first, let's look at the architectural blueprint. Because really, to get how the scapula works, you've got to understand its basic design. Think of it like a skyscraper. You can't appreciate it until you know about the foundation and the support beams, right?
So what are we actually looking at here? Well, at its most basic, the scapula is this big, flat, triangle-shaped bone. It just kind of sits on your upper back. And here's the cool part. It glides along your ribs from about the second to the seventh one. It's not locked in place at all. It's a totally mobile platform.
And this whole structure is really made up of 4 key players. You've got the main body, that's the big flat part, and then you have these 3 really specialized projections sticking off of it: the spinous process, the acromion, and the coracoid process. Let's get to know them one by one.
Okay, time for a tour of the landmarks. And this is where it gets really interesting, because we're going to connect the dots between the shape of the bone and what it actually does. You're about to see how every single bump, ridge, and groove on this thing has a super important job.
So, if you're looking at the back of the scapula, one feature just jumps right out at you. It's this big, shelf-like ridge running straight across it. That is the spinous process. Yep, the spine of the scapula. And it's a really important dividing line.
See, that spine neatly splits the back of the bone into 2 hollows, or what we call fossa. The smaller spot above the spine, that's the supraspinous fossa, and it's where the supraspinatus muscle starts. The much larger area below the spine is the infraspinous fossa, and that's the starting point for the infraspinatus muscle. So these aren't just dents in the bone, they're basically launch pads for 2 of your most important rotator cuff muscles.
Now, let's look at the very top edge, the superior border. You'll find this tiny little dip, but don't let its size fool you. It's the suprascapular notch, and it's critical. Why? Because a ligament stretches right over the top of it, turning this little notch into a full-on tunnel, or a foramen. It's a protected little highway for a super important nerve and artery.
And this brings me to one of my favorite memory tricks in all of anatomy. To remember which one goes where, just think of this phrase: the Air Force flies above the Navy. Get it? The A artery passes above the ligament, while the nerve passes below it, through the tunnel, just like the Navy in a submarine. So simple, but it works every time.
Okay, let's shift over to the outer edge, the lateral border, and you'll notice right away it's way thicker than the other sides. Now, that's not by accident. It's built tough, like a structural pillar, because its job is to act as a fulcrum. That's the pivot point that has to handle all the force when your scapula rotates as you lift your arm up.
All right, now sticking out from the front, you've got this really cool hook-like thing called the coracoid process. And the name is perfect. It literally means like a bird's beak. But don't let its small size fool you. This little piece of bone is like a bustling downtown intersection. It's the main anchor point for 3 different muscles and 3 major ligaments that keep your shoulder stable. It's a powerhouse.
Okay, so we've taken the grand tour of all the important landmarks. Now, let's put all this knowledge together. Think of this next part as the owner's manual for your shoulder.
So here's a fun little puzzle. Let's say you just found a scapula. How can you tell if it belongs to a left or a right shoulder? Well, it's actually a pretty simple 3-point check. First, you find the glenoid cavity. That's the socket for the arm bone, and it has to be facing outwards, away from the body. Got it? Okay. Second, that bird's beak, the coracoid process, has to point forwards. And finally, number 3, that big bony shelf, the spinous process, must be on the back. If all 3 of those things line up, you've solved it. You know exactly which side it's from.
All right, now for my favorite part, some of the amazing stories and secrets that are hidden right inside this bone. We're going to go from a modern-day clinic all the way back in time to ancient reptiles. You're not going to believe some of this.
Okay, get this. Did you know that your shoulder blade doesn't actually start out on your back? Nope. When you're developing in the womb, the scapula actually forms way up in your neck area, and then it has to migrate down to its proper spot. And sometimes that journey doesn't quite finish. When that happens, it leads to a condition called Sprengel's deformity, where the shoulder blade stays stuck up high on the back.
Here's something really cool you can actually try on yourself right now. Go ahead, find your collarbone, your clavicle. Now trace it with your finger out towards your shoulder. Right before you get to the very edge, drop your finger down about an inch, that's about 2.5 centimeters, and press in. That little bony point you feel, that's the tip of your coracoid process. You're literally touching the anchor point for some of your shoulder's most important muscles.
And for our last secret, you remember that coracoid process we keep talking about? Well, it's actually an echo from our deep evolutionary past. This is wild. In reptiles, the coracoid isn't part of the scapula at all. It's a completely separate bone. Over millions of years of evolution, in mammals like us, it's fused onto the scapula. So that little bird's beak is a direct link to our ancient ancestors, written right into your skeleton. How cool is that?
So we've toured its structure, we've uncovered some of its secrets. What's the big takeaway here? What's the one thing you really need to remember about this amazing bone?
Here it is. The scapula is so much more than just a shoulder blade. You have to think of it as a dynamic, floating platform. It's what anchors your entire arm to your body, but it does it in a way that gives you both rock-solid stability and that incredible range of motion that really lets us interact with the world.
And that really leaves us with a final, bigger thought, doesn't it? The scapula alone holds these incredible stories about how we develop, how we move, even where we came from. It really makes you wonder, what other secrets about our past, and even our future potential, are just waiting to be discovered, written into the very architecture of our own bodies?